Hello everyone, Darkavolt Trades here. Now today, I'm going to talk about something hard. And this video may cost me followers, and that's okay. I respect people's decision to follow or not follow me. I appreciate all of you who stick around for my counter-apologetics and video responses, and the educational content I've devoted my life to. So today, I'm going to dive into my beliefs. Now, I don't typically go into my opinions or do deep dives on my own beliefs, but I often hear theists try to shift the burden of proof onto atheists and then complain when we don't take that burden off of them. If you say a God exists, you adopt the burden of proof. If you make a claim about what exists in reality, you adopt the burden of proof. So today, I'm going to take the extra step and give these people what they're asking for, and hopefully give you, my wonderful and no doubt of above average intelligence and attractiveness audience, some ammunition to fire back if you find yourself wanting to engage. Let's get right to it. I'm not just someone who doesn't believe in gods. I actively believe there are no gods. I affirm it, plainly and unapologetically. Now that may sound bold, but let me try to break it down. People often say you can't prove a universal negative, or you can't know for sure that no gods exist. But here's the thing. We operate on reasonable certainty, not absolute certainty. We say things like, there are no leprechauns that hide their pots of gold at the end of a rainbow, or there are no fire-breathing dragons in my garage, and no one demands that we leave room for mythical exceptions. Belief or disbelief is about where the evidence points. And so far, the track record of God showing up when we investigate, 0 for every single one. Every testable God claim has failed. Every unfalsifiable one looks identical to pure imagination, and the world continues to make sense without invoking the supernatural. Now, I'm not claiming some divine insight into the nature of existence. I'm doing what we all do, following the evidence, and when none appears, drawing the conclusion that fits. I'm not holding on to some kind of dogma. I'm holding to consistency. Now, I don't claim to know everything. I'm not omniscient, and I don't need to be. But here's the thing. We don't demand absolute certainty from anyone about anything. We believe based on weight, not perfection, evidence, not omniscience. You believe your car's brakes will work tomorrow, not because you've inspected every molecule, but because they've worked every time so far. You trust your friend won't stab you in the neck. Not because you're certain, but because you have reasons. This is how belief works. You go with what the evidence supports, and you revise if it fails. So when I say, I believe no gods exist, I'm not asserting divine omniscience. I'm saying the God hypothesis has been tested, weighted, examined, and consistently comes up empty. There is no reason to think it's true, and every reason to treat it like any other unevidenced claim, as false. If you say we can't know that, then by your own logic, you can't say anything is true. Not that you're real, not that the earth exists, not that the floor beneath you won't collapse. And that's just not reasonable skepticism. No human operates or could operate under that kind of reasoning. And frankly, I'm not interested in living like Descartes in a sensory deprivation tank. I'll take evidence, probability, and reasonable belief. And based on that, I can confidently say no gods exist. So let's start with the gods that actually make claims we can test, the falsifiable gods. A falsifiable claim is one that, if it were false, we could in principle find out. So when a god supposedly heals the sick, manipulates nature, or answers prayers in specific observable ways, those are testable claims. And we have tested them. Prayer, religious studies by religious and non-religious groups show no effect beyond the rate of chance. And sometimes, knowing you're being prayed for actually makes the outcomes worse. No joke. Faith healing, under controlled conditions, it's indistinguishable from placebo. Miracles are just anecdotes. Cherry-pick stories with no reliable, repeatable evidence. Nothing that couldn't also happen naturally and often does. If a god is really behind any of these things, it's either incredibly subtle, weirdly shy, or has the statistical footprint of randomness. And here's the thing. When we apply the same standard of evidence we use everywhere else, like medicine, science, history, those god claims don't hold up. They've been tested and come up empty again and again. And this isn't me being closed-minded, I'm just honest with the results. So when a God claim gets tested and fails, many believers retreat to a different kind of God, one that can't be tested at all. This God is beyond time, beyond space, beyond evidence. It doesn't intervene in the world in any detectable way. You can't prove it, you can't disprove it, and it offers zero predictive power. Now this leads me to probably my favorite question to ask theists. What's the difference between a God that has no detectable effect on reality and something that simply doesn't exist? If you can't show that your God affects anything, changes anything, explains anything, or even might be observable under some condition, then how is it any more real than an idea in your head? We don't get to believe things just because they're unfalsifiable. If we did, we'd have to take every baseless claim seriously, from celestial teapots to psychic goldfish. Being beyond scrutiny is not a strength. It is a red flag. If your God only exists in a way that mimics total non-existence, you haven't defended a deity. You've described a ghost story that lost even the pretense of a plot. Let's test a pattern. Whenever we didn't understand something, thunder, disease, earthquakes, the origin of life, religion rushed in with an answer. It's God. And then science showed up. And one by one, those divine explanations collapsed. Thunder, air pressure and electricity. Disease, microbes, not demons. Earthquakes, tectonic plates, not divine punishment. The origin of life? Well, to be fair, it isn't conclusive, but there is far more evidence for abiogenesis than anything else. But that's another video entirely. The track record here isn't subtle. Scientific explanations don't just replace religious ones, they outperform them. They make testable predictions, yield technology, and crucially, they work whether or not you believe in them. And the reverse? That never happens. You will never hear a scientist say, "Well, we thought it was relativity, but it turns out Zeus was just angry again." Now, some people try to pivot. Well, sure, science explains all of that, but you can't explain what started the universe. And hey, maybe not yet. But that's just what's been happening for centuries. When they find one thing we haven't explained yet, the moment there's a gap in our understanding, some folks still rush to cram their God into it. It's like trying to plug a USB the wrong way for the 100th time. It never fits, it never works, but the habit is hard to break. Every time we've said, God did it, and then actually checked, we found something else. So when I say, I believe no gods exist, I'm not clinging to ignorance. I'm following the evidence. And the evidence keeps telling the same story. Gods explain nothing that wasn't better explained without them. Once upon a time, we thought gods hurled lightning bolts, that they pulled the sun across the sky, or caused plagues when angry, or sprinkled blessings on crops when pleased. Now, we call those things weather, heliophysics, germs, and agriculture. Every time we had a mystery and said, "Ah yes, that must be a god," we've been wrong, without exception. Lightning isn't Zeus. Disease isn't divine punishment. Rain isn't a heavenly mood swing. What used to be divine intervention is now meteorology, virology, astronomy, psychology, plate tectonics, and particle physics. We have better tools. We ask better questions. And none of those answers ever point back to, "Yep, must be a god." But let's be blunt. The gods have been getting laid off for centuries, and they haven't shown up to reapply for the job. The pattern is clear. The divine used to be everywhere, in volcanoes, in sickness, in mental illness, in eclipses. But the more we understand, the more the gods retreat. They're always hiding in whatever we haven't figured out yet. That's not evidence of their existence. That's the opposite. If gods were real, you'd expect to find at least one thing in nature that defied natural explanation in a way that screamed divine fingerprints. But we don't. Not even once. What we do find is that the scoreboard reads, science, hundreds, thousands, millions, gods, 0. At some point, it becomes reasonable, no, necessary, to stop crediting the supernatural for the things it never did. If gods exist, surely they've done something, right? I mean, we've been watching the universe for quite some time now. We've studied stars being born, black holes colliding, molecules dancing in the soup of life. We've sequenced genomes, cracked atoms, sent tiny robots into the void of space. But not once have we found anything at all that we can confidently attribute to a divine source. No thunderbolt with a return address, no prayer that reversed gravity, no holy fingerprints in DNA. Not one miracle with a verified miracle maker. Now you might say, well, the gods just work in mysterious ways. But that's not an explanation. That's a shrug with branding. And as I alluded to before, if something can't be distinguished from natural causes or coincidence, then it's functionally no different from something that doesn't exist at all. If I told you my invisible dragon rearranged your bookshelf overnight, but every time you checked there was no evidence, at what point do you stop entertaining the idea of the dragon? That's where we are with gods. Not only are they absent from scientific explanation, they're absent from everything. We have zero confirmed sightings, zero confirmed interventions, zero explanatory value. The God hypothesis has a batting advantage of absolute zero. It's not that the divine is shy, it's that from everything we can tell, it's just not there. Let's talk about a very persistent God, the God of the gaps. This is the God that supposedly lives in everything we don't understand yet. Don't know where lightning comes from? Must be Zeus. Don't understand diseases? Must be a curse. Don't know what consciousness is? Insert deity here. This version of God isn't known for answers. It's known for hiding in the cracks of our ignorance. But here's the awkward part. Those cracks keep sealing up. The gaps shrink constantly, irreversibly. The more we learn, the less we need divine placeholders. And yet, it never goes the other way. No one says, we thought this was just physics, but actually it's Yahweh. There's no moment in modern history where a scientific explanation was replaced by a more satisfying religious one. You never hear a physicist say, we were wrong about electromagnetism, turns out it's angels. Science grows, gods retreat. That's the one-way trend. And here's the kicker. If your God only exists in what we don't know, then as knowledge expands, your God has less and less room to breathe. And that's not a foundation, that's a slow erasure. So if belief in gods is propped up by ignorance, and ignorance is shrinking, then what are we left with? A God on the run, and frankly, not a very convincing one. Now let's tie this all together, and I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. Based on everything we've covered, the lack of evidence, the retreat of God explanations, the utter absence of divine fingerprints on anything verifiable, I think it's reasonable, rational, and completely justified to say it, no gods exist. Now cue the gasps and the epistemic pearl clutching, but you can't know that, you can't prove a negative. Yeah, the familiar chant of those defending the God hypothesis with the same energy as someone clinging to a Blockbuster card in 2025. Cute, but not convincing. Let's clear this up. We don't need absolute certainty to make strong knowledge claims. We do it all the time. I say there are no unicorns in my garage. I've checked, repeatedly. And unless I find hoof prints or glitter in my oil pan, I feel pretty safe saying there are no unicorns in my garage. And I would argue that you'd agree, not because I'd have 100% proof, but because nothing points to them being there. That's where I am at with gods. If something exists and affects reality, we should be able to detect it, or at the very least notice its effects. But we don't ever. And despite thousands of years, billions of believers, and a mountain of motivated searching, all we've turned up is natural causes, natural explanations, and unanswered questions slowly becoming answered ones. And God, not a whisper. So what do? We treat gods like we treat any other unfounded hypothesis. Until demonstrated, we withhold belief. And when the evidence consistently points the other way, when the world behaves exactly like no gods are there, then not only is it reasonable to say, I don't believe in gods, it's entirely rational to take the next step and say, I believe no gods exist. Not from arrogance, not from overreach, but because by every standard we apply to every other claim in our lives, the God hypothesis has failed to show up, and we don't owe belief to no-shows. All right, let's head off the usual objections at the pass, because we both know they're coming. And so here's a speed round of the greatest hits and why they don't land. Well, you can't prove a negative. That's only half true. Some negatives are provable, like there are no squared circles, or this sealed jar contains no elephants. The issue isn't whether it's a negative, it's whether there's any reason to think a positive is true in the first place. And gods? So far, they've shown up less than your childhood friend who says they'd return your favorite DVD. You're just closing your mind to possibilities. Well, I'm not. I'm just holding claims to the same standard we use for literally everything else. If we say gods are possible, then so are leprechauns, Odin, and sentient cucumbers whispering answers into mystics' ears. Possibility is cheap. Evidence is expensive. Until we see a god swipe their divine credit card, I'm not buying it. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Well, sure, sometimes. But if you've looked everywhere in every way, something should show up and it still doesn't, that absence starts to look an awful lot like evidence. If your house has no footprints, no broken locks, and your snacks are all untouched, it's pretty reasonable to say no burglar showed up. You're just angry at God. Yeah, I'm also mad at Voldemort and the Tooth Fairy. Look, rejecting a claim because it doesn't hold up isn't anger, it's discernment. If anything, I'm frustrated with the conversation, that we're still treating the God hypothesis like it deserves a privileged pass. And I'm actually angry at the people attempting to pass laws based on their belief to their specific God, which affect me and the people I love. In short, these objections don't give gods any more credibility. They just shift the burden of proof, stall the conversation, and rely on fallacies. But I'm not here to play dodgeball with nonsense. I'm here to ask what the evidence actually supports and where reason leads. And so far, it doesn't lead to gods. So where does this all leave us? Well, if you're still here, congratulations. You've just sat through a philosophically grounded, evidence-informed roast of the entire concept of gods. And yet, I haven't summoned lightning to strike me in my chair, turned to salt, or been chased by divine locusts, which, in itself, kinda proves my point. Look, I'm not saying it's wrong to believe things. I'm saying it's important to believe things for good reasons. And when it comes to gods, every flavor, model, and cosmic personality type, the reasons don't just fall short. They collapse entirely under even basic scrutiny. I'm not making an extraordinary claim. I'm pointing out that no gods have ever met the ordinary standards we use to justify belief in anything else. And if we wouldn't believe a roommate who said a dragon lives in their sock drawer without a single scorch mark to show for it, then why treat God claims any differently? So yes, I am a hard atheist, not because I have divine knowledge, but because the burden of proof has had thousands of years to do its thing, and all it's turned up is stories, threats, and a weird obsession with what people do on weekends. But if you're still clinging to the, but we can't know for sure, then fine. But apply that standard consistently. You don't believe in unicorns, Bigfoot, or garden gnomes running the Federal Reserve. You believe based on evidence, or you don't believe at all. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to treat gods like every other claim we stopped talking about seriously once we grew up. But thanks for watching, and if this resonated, hit the like button, and subscribe to stick around. There's more where that came from. Or don't, I'm not your god. Special thanks to my patrons, especially Clanimus, Anima, and Sora, who are my top patrons. If you'd like to join them and maybe get a special shout out at the end of my videos, you can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. But I appreciate all of you who help out, even if it's only with a quick comment. Thank you. At the end here, I want to leave you all by providing some pivotal scenes from people that helped me, and some that may help you understand why I put forth the positive claim that no gods exist. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit more of where I'm coming from when I say I'm a hard atheist. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email or send me a message in Discord. I love answering questions and hope I can help clear things up for you. And as always, keep learning.
Today I brought a model that I made that is meant to demonstrate particular fallacies. And I find it interesting because in my mind this thing it demonstrates a load of fallacies. It's not just one. It's like handles a lot of them. And the way these are set up, what they model is, in this jar, there is existent dice.
Can we get zoomed down a little bit?
You can see them. It's a jar with dice inside it. Is there a close-up or is it not working? Okay, and then in the second jar, I have non-existent dice. And in the final jar, I have transcendent supernatural dice. And for the sake of the first I guess, game or experiment or a demonstration, we're going to accept that the supernatural transcendent dice, in fact, are existent. So we're going to say that in this jar are supernatural transcendent dice. In this jar is non-existent dice, and in this jar we have existent dice. I was going to bring a kitchen scale, but I think I can describe that part of it without demonstrating it, and people will understand what I was going to do, which was to take the dice out of the jar, weigh the jar, put the dice back in the jar, weigh the jar, and demonstrate that the die add weight so that they have mass and weight. But you can also see that they reflect light, that we can observe them because they reflect light, and also they make a considerably annoying tonal sound, so that they do make, sound. They're responsible for sound waves when they clink around and hit the jar. So they have some substantial material existence that is fairly well demonstrated, just simply inherently by the dice. And so for the first thing I want to do, I want to put the camera on Matt for just a second. Just on Matt. Okay. And now I want to come back to the jars. Okay. Now I've put the jars all together. And what I want to ask to consider is what we want to do now is separate these things into two groups. We want to separate it into a group of existent items with the assumption that the supernatural transcendent dice exist, and non-existent items, which would be the group with the non-existent dice.
Okay.
And so my question is, how do we do that?
We guess. I'm going to guess that those are the ones that don't exist.
Well, how do we know if you're right?
You could just take it on faith.
In other words, we have no criteria with which to determine whether or not Matt chose the right jar, whether or not he pulled the non-existent dice out, or whether he actually pulled the existent transcendent and supernatural dice out. We can't test it because the supernatural dice have the exact same attributes as the non-existent dice. There is no difference between the two. And the problem when we define something as supernatural and transcendent and then we give it all of the same material qualities as nothing in a context of dice,
Right.
we basically eviscerate the term existence and exist because we no longer have any criteria that determines what exists from what does not exist. And so we have to kill the word exist in order to say that supernatural transcendent dice exist. It no longer has meaning because it's no longer discernible from non-existence.
I'm a thorn in the side of people who want to call and be pedantic about these definitions because I am an atheist in the sense that most people are referring to in the philosophical literature when they engage in these sort of arguments in order to go into pedantry about the definition of atheism. I am that definition of atheism. I do not think any God, as has been defined, is possible. I think most, if not all, of the God definitions that I have been presented with are inconsistent internally, nonsense, improbable, or impossible. And thus, I reject them all. And unless and until I can be presented with one that does make sense, I don't think it's possible. I think it is impossible. I actively do not believe it is possible for a God to exist.
Believers can't even give a consistent definition of what their God is supposed to be.
You're not liars if your definition of atheism is that you don't know that there's any evidence for God. If that's your definition, then that is...
Oh, I actively don't think that it's even possible. I don't think that there is, I think I'm bordering on atheism. I don't think that when somebody says there is a God, I don't even think that that's a coherent sentence. There's no definition of what a God would even be that has any sort of internal consistency, and I think it's a logical impossibility. Go.
Of course, the first fact in evidence against God is that there is no evidence for God. We have to start there because logically, having no reason to believe something is a pretty good reason not to believe it, especially when such is neither probable nor even possible. We don't get to say that anything is possible because we know too many things that are not. A cow cannot jump over the moon, for example. That's not just improbable, that's physically impossible. In order to say whether something is possible, there must be a precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. You don't have that for gods or ghosts or demons or souls or for magical enchantments like blessings or curses. So not only is none of that evident, it's not even a possibility to consider. The fact that the Bible and Quran and all of the rest of this man-made mythology even exists in such defective, conflicting condition is evidence against God, who should have corrected all that. And despite all attempts at philosophical rationalization, there is no actual factual evidence of God outside of Scripture either, literally not even a possibility to consider.